The notification lit up my phone screen at exactly 3 in the afternoon. "I'm really sick today, babe. Can't make it to our date. I'm so sorry." My heart sank reading Mac's message. Today marked 6 months since we became official, and I'd spent the entire morning planning our anniversary celebration, reservations at his favorite Italian restaurant, a custom playlist of songs that reminded me of us, even a small gift I'd been hiding for weeks. My fingers flew across the keyboard, offering to bring medicine, make homemade soup, anything to help him feel better. His response came quickly. He just needed rest. Nothing serious, probably food poisoning from yesterday's lunch meeting. "Don't worry about me, Louis. I'll be fine by tomorrow." I tried focusing on work after that, but concentration felt impossible. Every few minutes I'd check my phone, hoping for an update about his condition. By evening, restlessness drove me out of my apartment. I needed groceries anyway, just basic necessities. Nothing exciting. The supermarket was moderately crowded for a Thursday, shopping carts rattling through aisles while pop music played overhead. I grabbed a basket and wandered toward the cereal section, my mind still occupied with thoughts of Mac recovering alone in his apartment. Then I saw him. My breath caught in my throat, my entire body going rigid. There stood Mac in the cereal aisle, looking perfectly healthy, laughing at something the man beside him had said. This stranger stood close, uncomfortably close, leaning in to whisper something that made Mac's face light up with genuine amusement. That particular smile, I recognized it intimately. That was the smile he reserved for moments when he felt completely at ease, completely happy. The smile I thought belonged only to our private moments together. The chemistry between them radiated outward like heat waves. The stranger's hand rested lightly on Mac's shoulder as they compared cereal boxes, fingers lingering longer than casual friendship would justify. Mac gazed directly into the other man's eyes while speaking, his body language open and engaged in ways that suggested deep familiarity. My chest constricted painfully, as though someone had reached inside and squeezed my heart with an iron fist. I stood frozen, basket dangling from my hand, unable to process what my eyes were showing me. The stranger was tall, probably 6 feet, with a sharp jawline and an expensive leather jacket that screamed sophistication. But more than his appearance, his confidence caught my attention, the kind of self-assured presence that comes from knowing exactly where you stand with someone. Very comfortable. Dangerously comfortable. Neither of them noticed me initially. Max seemed completely absorbed in whatever conversation they were having, occasionally touching the man's arm for emphasis when making a point. My mind raced through explanations, desperately searching for innocent reasons why my supposedly sick boyfriend was grocery shopping with a mysterious stranger. Maybe this was a coincidence? Maybe Mac felt suddenly better and ran into an old friend. But the intimacy between them suggested something far more complicated than chance encounters. "Mac?" My voice emerged shaky and uncertain, barely louder than a whisper. He spun around abruptly, and for one unguarded second, pure panic flooded his eyes. His pupils dilated, his jaw went slack, and every muscle in his face tensed with obvious alarm. Then he recovered quickly, forcing his expression into something resembling casual surprise, though the smile he produced looked painfully fake and strained. "Oh, Louis. Hey. What are you doing here?" "Grocery shopping," I replied flatly, my gaze shifting to examine the stranger more carefully. "I thought you were sick. Dying. Actually, based on your texts." The stranger sensed the awkwardness immediately and took a small step backward. Though he didn't leave entirely, he remained nearby, observing our interaction with barely concealed interest, as though watching some entertaining drama unfold. Mac nervously ran his fingers through his hair, that telltale gesture he always made right before telling a lie, a habit I'd noticed months ago but never mentioned. "I was feeling sick," he defended himself, but his tone sounded hollow and unconvincing. "But Philip insisted I get some fresh air, thought it might help, so I just—" "Philip?" I interrupted, turning my full attention to the stranger. Philip nodded politely in my direction, but something lurked behind his eyes, satisfaction perhaps, or maybe smugness, like he enjoyed witnessing my discomfort. Mac reached for my hand, attempting to bridge the physical distance between us. "Louis, it's really not what you think. I swear I can explain everything." I jerked my hand away from his touch, the movement sharp and deliberate, because suddenly explanation seemed unnecessary. The truth stood right in front of me, crystal clear despite all the attempted justifications. The man before me stammering, lying, desperately trying to control a narrative that had already spun out of control. This wasn't the Mac I thought I knew. Or perhaps more accurately, perhaps I'd never truly known him at all. Perhaps I'd been dating a carefully constructed version of someone, while the real Mac existed somewhere beyond my understanding, living a life that intersected with mine but never fully merged. The fluorescent supermarket lights suddenly felt too bright, too exposing. Other shoppers pushed their carts past us, oblivious to the small relationship earthquake happening in aisle 7. Philip shifted his weight, still watching, still present when he should have had the decency to disappear. And Max stood between us, literally and figuratively, his face displaying guilt and fear and desperation all at once. "Who is he?" I asked quietly, surprised by how calm my voice sounded despite the chaos in my chest. Mac opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. We're, Philip, your boyfriend clearly doesn't know about me," Philip interjected smoothly, his voice carrying an edge of amusement. How interesting. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. My vision blurred slightly at the edges, the entire scene taking on a surreal quality, as though I'd stepped into someone else's nightmare. This couldn't be happening. Not today. Not on our anniversary. Not after 6 months of what I'd believed was genuine connection and growing love. But it was happening. And somewhere beneath the shock and hurt, a small voice in my head whispered what I'd been refusing to acknowledge for weeks. I'd seen the signs. I'd chosen to ignore them. And now, standing in a supermarket cereal aisle with my sick boyfriend who wasn't actually sick, I finally had to face the truth I'd been avoiding. The drive home felt like moving through thick fog, every traffic light blurring into the next, every street corner triggering fragments of memory I couldn't suppress. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary, knuckles white with tension. Inside my head, a war raged. Logic battling emotion, denial fighting acceptance. The scene replayed endlessly. Mac's nervous laughter, Philip's possessive hand on his shoulder, the undeniable romantic tension crackling between them like electricity. My phone buzzed 3 times from the passenger seat where I'd thrown it. Mac calling. I let it ring through to voicemail each time. By the time I reached my apartment building, text messages had started flooding in. My phone screen lit up repeatedly with notifications. "Luis, please let me explain," followed by "You're misunderstanding everything. And then Philip is just helping me with something important." Helping him with what exactly? Helping him perfect the art of deception? Teaching him advanced lying techniques? I powered off my phone entirely rather than read another justification. My apartment felt emptier than usual when I entered, the silence oppressive and suffocating. I dropped my keys on the hallway table, the small wooden piece Mac had helped me pick out at a vintage market 2 months ago. That memory stung now. How many of our shared experiences had been genuine? How many had been contaminated by whatever he had going with Philip? I collapsed onto my couch and pressed my palms against my face, trying to steady my breathing. Panic attack symptoms crept in at the edges: rapid heartbeat, shallow breaths, sweaty palms. I forced myself to inhale slowly, counting to 4, holding, then exhaling. My mind began rewinding through recent weeks, searching for clues I'd missed. Mac had been coming home later than usual, always with reasonable explanations. Unexpected client meetings, traffic delays, helping a coworker with a project. 3 weeks ago, he'd suddenly announced he was joining a gym, which seemed odd since he'd never expressed interest in fitness before. 2 weeks ago, I'd noticed a new cologne, something expensive and sophisticated that didn't match his usual style. When I'd commented on it, he'd brushed it off as an impulse purchase. Last week, he'd been unusually protective of his phone, angling the screen away whenever notifications appeared. The signs had been there. I just refused to see them because seeing meant confronting uncomfortable possibilities. Acknowledging meant potentially losing what we had, or what I thought we had. Sleep proved impossible that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, watching shadows shift as occasional cars passed outside my window. Every possibility ran through my analytical mind on an endless loop. If Philip was just a friend, why lie about being sick? Why hide their meeting? If I was overreacting as Mac's text suggested, why had his eyes shown such obvious panic when I'd discovered them? Questions multiplied faster than I could process them, each one spawning 3 more. Morning arrived reluctantly, gray light filtering through my curtains. My phone, powered back on, immediately buzzed with a new message timestamped 7 a.m. I'm coming over. We need to talk. I'm not leaving until you hear me out. Classic Mac, persistent and stubborn whenever he needed to justify himself. I didn't respond. Let him wonder. Let him experience a fraction of the uncertainty he'd put me through. By noon, aggressive knocking rattled my apartment door. Luis, please, open the door. I know you're in there. His voice carried through the wood, strained and desperate. I approached slowly, debating whether this conversation was worth having. Part of me wanted to leave him standing in the hallway indefinitely, but another part, the part still stupidly attached to him, needed answers. I opened the door but left the chain lock engaged, creating a narrow gap between us. The physical barrier represented the emotional distance I needed to maintain. Mac looked exhausted, dark purple circles staining the skin beneath his eyes. His usually neat hair disheveled. Guilt was written across every feature of his face in bold letters. Let me in, he requested softly, almost pleading. We can talk from here, I replied coldly, crossing my arms defensively across my chest. He released a frustrated sigh, running his hand through his already messy hair. Fine. Luis? Philip, he's my ex-boyfriend. The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. Ex-boyfriend? The man I'd seen him with yesterday, laughing and touching and sharing intimate space that was his ex. And he'd never mentioned this person's existence in 6 months of dating. Not once, not even in passing when we'd shared stories about previous relationships. Your ex, I repeated slowly, keeping my voice dangerously calm despite the fury building inside. And you never mentioned him. Not once in 6 months. Not even when we talked about our dating histories. 'Cause he didn't matter. Mac's tone turned defensive immediately. We broke up 3 years ago. He moved to another state entirely. I genuinely thought he was gone from my life permanently. But he came back, I pointed out sharply. And when he did, you decided lying to me was the better option? On our anniversary? Mac's face drained of color. The realization hit him visibly. He'd forgotten our anniversary completely. 6 months together, and the date had slipped his mind entirely while he was busy with Philip. Louis, I'm sorry. Work has been overwhelming lately, and busy with Philip? I interrupted bitterly. Is he distracting you so thoroughly that you can't even remember your current boyfriend exists? Silence filled the hallway, heavy and suffocating. Other apartment doors remained closed, but I imagined neighbors listening to our confrontation through thin walls. Mac stared at the floor, unable to meet my eyes, unable to offer any defense that would justify his choices. Get out, I finally said, my voice breaking despite my efforts to sound strong. Louis? I said, get out, Mac. The words came out louder than intended. I slammed the door shut, the chain lock still engaged, creating a definitive barrier between us. He knocked again immediately, his voice muffled through the wood, pleading and desperate. I ignored him, walking to my bedroom and locking that door too, creating multiple layers of separation. Only then, alone and barricaded, did I allow myself to break down completely. Tears came in violent waves, shaking my entire body. I slid down the bedroom door until I sat on the floor, hugging my knees to my chest, sobbing into the empty room. Because the truth was becoming impossible to deny. Mac had betrayed me. Maybe not physically, maybe not intentionally, but emotionally he'd already left our relationship, and I'd been too blind to see it happening. 3 days passed in agonizing slow motion. 3 days where I avoided Mac completely, blocked his number, muted his social media accounts, deleted our text thread so I wouldn't be tempted to reread old conversations, searching for hidden meanings. I'd convinced myself that distance would provide clarity, that time apart would somehow lessen the crushing pain in my chest. Instead, the opposite occurred. With each passing hour, jealousy and hurt intensified, growing more acute rather than fading. The wound felt fresh every morning when I woke up, immediately remembering the betrayal before I'd even fully opened my eyes. Work became a blur of meaningless tasks. I'd stare at my computer screen for hours, accomplishing nothing, my mind constantly drifting back to that supermarket encounter. My colleague Nina noticed something was wrong during our Wednesday afternoon meeting. She cornered me by the coffee machine afterward, concern evident in her expression. Louis, your project files are completely disorganized and you left your lunch in the conference room yesterday. Seriously, what's going on with you? Nothing. I lied automatically, but even to my own ears the words sounded hollow and unconvincing. Nina didn't push further, but her worried glance followed me as I returned to my desk. I appreciated her discretion even as I resented her accurate perception that I was falling apart. Thursday evening, my best friend Corey showed up at my apartment unannounced, using his emergency key to let himself in. He found me on the couch in the same clothes I'd worn the previous day, surrounded by empty takeout containers and binge-watching some mindless reality show. Absolutely not, he declared, grabbing my remote and turning off the television. You're not doing this. Get dressed. We're going out for coffee. I don't care what you want, Corey interrupted firmly. You're spiraling and I'm not watching it happen. Put on clean clothes, we're leaving in 10 minutes. Reluctantly, I complied. Arguing with Corey when he used that particular tone was pointless. 20 minutes later, we walked into the cafe where Mac and I had our first official date. A stupid masochistic choice, I should have protested. But I was too emotionally drained to suggest alternatives. The familiar smell of espresso and pastries triggered a wave of nostalgia so powerful I nearly turned around and left immediately. Then I saw them. The universe apparently enjoyed torturing me, because there sat Mac and Philip in a corner booth, coffee cups between them. This wasn't a casual coincidental meeting. Philip's hand rested on the table mere inches from Mac's, their fingers almost touching. The positioning was deliberate, intimate, possessive. And Mac? He was laughing, genuinely laughing in the exact way he used to laugh at my jokes during our early dates. Corey grabbed my arm immediately, sensing my impulse to either flee or confront. Louise, don't. Let's just leave. But I was already moving toward them, drawn by some self-destructive need to understand what was happening. Both men looked up as I approached. Philip's expression remained neutral, almost bored, while Mac's eyes widened with a mixture of guilt and fear. Louis, Mac started, standing up so quickly his chair scraped loudly against the floor. This isn't what? I cut him off sharply and my raised voice attracted attention from nearby tables. Several customers turned to watch our confrontation unfold. Isn't exactly what it looks like. Your ex-boyfriend, sitting with you again, acting like you're together? Philip attempted to intervene, his voice smooth and irritatingly calm. Look man, we were just catching up. Nothing more than two old friends reconnecting. I'm not talking to you, I snapped at him, then redirected my focus entirely to Mac. You told me Philip meant nothing. You promised me this situation was innocent. But here you are, again with him smiling like I don't even exist. I wanted to explain everything properly, Mac said desperately, taking a step closer. But you blocked me. You won't answer my calls or respond to messages. What am I supposed to do? Maybe stop lying. My voice cracked with emotion. Maybe stop choosing him over me repeatedly. Mac's face went pale. I'm not choosing him. Louis, please, you have to understand. But I was already walking away, Corey following close behind. Before exiting the cafe, I glanced back one final time. Philip had placed his hand on Mac's shoulder in what was clearly a comforting gesture, and Mac allowed it, leaning slightly into the touch rather than pulling away. That image burned itself into my memory, another painful addition to the collection. At home, I finally broke down completely. Corey held me as I collapsed onto the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Why am I so stupid? I gasped between tears. All the signs were there, I just refused to see them. You're not stupid, Corey said firmly, his voice steady and reassuring. You were in love, and he took advantage of that trust. His words contained undeniable truth, but accepting that truth felt unbearable. Accepting meant acknowledging that the past 6 months, the memories, the intimacy, the future plans we'd discussed, all of it had been built on unstable ground. That perhaps Mac had never been fully present in our relationship because part of him remained tethered to Philip, to their shared history, to whatever unresolved feelings existed between them. I spent the rest of the evening replaying every interaction, analyzing every conversation, searching for the exact moment when things had started going wrong. Was it when Philip first contacted him? Had there been earlier warning signs I'd missed? Or had Mac been emotionally unavailable from the very beginning, using me as a placeholder while he waited for his ex to return? The questions multiplied endlessly, each one more painful than the last. Corey stayed until nearly midnight, making sure I ate something and wouldn't do anything self-destructive. After he left, I sat alone in my dark apartment, staring at my phone. One text sat in my drafts folder. Unsent. Are you in love with him? But I didn't send it, because deep down I already knew the answer. And hearing Mac confirm it would break whatever small pieces of my heart still remained intact. Instead, I deleted the draft, turned off my phone, and lay down in bed fully clothed. Tomorrow I'd figure out how to move forward. Tomorrow I'd start processing the betrayal and planning my recovery. But tonight I just needed to survive the crushing weight of realizing that the person I loved most in the world had been lying to me all along. And perhaps even worse, that I'd let him. 2 more days crawled by in excruciating monotony. I'd made my decision, completely finished with Mac. No more second chances, no more pathetic attempts at understanding his betrayal. Moving forward would hurt, but staying trapped in this cycle of lies and half-truths would destroy me entirely. I'd started researching therapists, updating my resume to stay busy. Anything to avoid thinking about him. But Saturday night arrived and Corey wasn't accepting my hermit lifestyle anymore. He showed up at my door with determination written across his face. You're coming to Marcus's party, non-negotiable. You need distraction, not isolation. I protested weakly, but Corey physically pulled me off my couch, threw a decent shirt at me, and refused to leave until I'd changed. An hour later, we arrived at Marcus's downtown loft. Music pulsing through the walls, colored lights flashing across crowds of dancing bodies. The party was packed, easily over 100 people crammed into the space. I accepted a drink from the makeshift bar, hoping alcohol might numb the constant ache in my chest. Then I spotted them across the room. Mac and Philip stood in a quiet corner, heads bent close together in intense conversation. Mac looked stressed, his shoulders hunched defensively, while Philip appeared calm and collected, playing the role of comforter perfectly. As I watched, Philip reached up and gently touched Mac's cheek, an intimate, possessive gesture that made my blood boil. Something inside me snapped completely. I slammed my drink on the nearest counter and marched directly toward them, adrenaline overriding common sense. Mac saw me approaching and his eyes went wide with panic. "Louis, wait." "No," I said firmly, stopping directly in front of them, close enough to smell Philip's expensive cologne mixed with Mac's familiar scent. "I want the truth. Right now. What exactly is happening here?" Philip tried inserting himself into the conversation, his tone condescending. "This is between Mac and me. You don't need to." "Shut up," I snapped at him viciously, then redirected my full attention to Mac. "Answer me. Now." Mac took a shaky breath, his hands trembling slightly. "Philip, he's been asking me to give us another chance. He regrets how things ended between us. He thinks we still have something worth salvaging." My stomach dropped like I'd been pushed off a cliff. "And you? What do you think about that?" The silence that followed was devastating. It stretched on for what felt like hours but was probably only seconds. In that silence I heard everything Mac couldn't say out loud. "I told him no," Mac finally whispered, but his voice carried absolutely no conviction. "Did you?" I challenged, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "Because every single time I see you, you're with him. Every time I try trusting you, you lie to me. So tell me honestly, Mac, are you actually choosing me, or are you just stuck in guilt and can't admit what you really want?" Tears filled Mac's eyes, spilling over onto his cheeks. "I love you, Louis. I genuinely do. But that's not enough," I said, feeling my own voice crack with emotion. "Love shows up in actions, not just words. And your actions? They're all pointing directly toward him." Philip finally spoke again, his tone infuriatingly smug. "Maybe because he's finally realizing what we had was authentic. What you two have is just temporary." That did it. I completely lost control. My hand shot out and I shoved Philip hard, not violently enough to hurt him seriously, but firm enough that he stumbled backward into the wall. "Stay away from him. Stay away from us." Immediately 2 security guards appeared, alerted by nearby partygoers who'd noticed the commotion. Corey materialized beside me, grabbing my arm firmly. "Louis, come on. We're leaving, now." He pulled me toward the exit before the situation could escalate further. Outside, cold night air hit my face, and I realized I was shaking uncontrollably, my breath coming in gasps. "Louis, listen to me," Corey said seriously, gripping both my shoulders and forcing me to look at him. "This situation is toxic for you. You deserve so much better than someone who can't decide what he wants." And for the first time since this nightmare began, I actually agreed with him completely. We walked to a nearby diner, sitting in a corner booth while I gradually calmed down. Corey ordered coffee and pie, and we sat in companionable silence for a while. Finally, he spoke. "You know what you need to do, right?" "Yeah," I admitted quietly. "I need to end this, for real this time." "Good," Corey said, squeezing my hand across the table, "because watching you suffer like this is killing me too." I went home that night with a strange sense of clarity. The confrontation, as messy as it had been, had shown me the undeniable truth. Mac was never going to choose me. He was caught between his past with Philip and whatever he thought we had, unable or unwilling to commit fully to either. And I refused to be someone's backup plan, their safe option while they figured out their feelings for someone else. Sunday morning arrived with surprising peace. I woke up feeling lighter somehow, as though a weight I'd been carrying had lifted slightly. Today was the day. I would officially end things with Mac. No ambiguity, no room for misinterpretation. I picked up my phone to compose the breakup text, choosing words carefully to be clear and final. But before I could hit send, my phone buzzed with an incoming message from Nina. "Louis, check Instagram." I'm so sorry, confused and dreading what I might find. I opened Instagram. My feed loaded, and there at the top was Philip's story. I clicked it and my world tilted sideways. A photo appeared, Mac and Philip at an upscale restaurant, soft candlelight illuminating their faces as they leaned close together across a small table. The intimacy in the image was undeniable. The caption read simply, "Some connections never fade." My vision blurred with tears. I refused to let fall. Everything became crystal clear in that moment. Mac might physically be my boyfriend, but emotionally and mentally, he'd already returned to Philip. Perhaps he'd never truly left. Perhaps I'd been fooling myself this entire time, seeing what I wanted to see instead of acknowledging reality. I didn't need to send that breakup text anymore. The relationship was already over. It had been over for a while, probably since the moment Philip came back into Mac's life. I'd just been too stubborn or too scared to accept it. But now I saw everything clearly, and it was time to finally let go. Sunday morning light filtered through my curtains, harsh and unforgiving. I'd made my final decision during a sleepless night. Today I would officially break up with Mac. No more delays, no more hoping things might magically improve. Enough was enough. I sat on my bed, phone in hand, mentally composing the words that would end our relationship permanently. Something clear and definitive that couldn't be misinterpreted or argued against. But before I could start typing, my phone vibrated with Nina's message. "Louise, check Instagram." I'm so sorry. Dread settled in my stomach like a stone. I opened the app and immediately saw Philip's story at the top of my feed. With trembling fingers I tapped it. The photo that appeared made my breath catch. Mac and Philip seated across from each other at an elegant restaurant, soft candlelight casting romantic shadows across their faces. They sat close enough that their heads nearly touched, intimate and cozy. The caption underneath read, "Some connections never fade." My vision swam. Everything suddenly made perfect, painful sense. Mac had been physically present in my life these past weeks, but emotionally he'd already drifted back to Philip. Maybe he'd never truly belonged to me at all. Maybe I'd been a placeholder, keeping his bed warm while he figured out what he really wanted. Without thinking, I called Mac directly. He answered on the second ring, his voice rushed and anxious. "Louise, I was just about to come over to your place." "Don't," I interrupted, my voice eerily emotionless. "I saw Philip's Instagram story, and now I understand exactly what you really want." "That picture is misleading," Mac said desperately, words tumbling out frantically. "Philip forced me to meet him for dinner, claimed we needed closure. I only went because you can't let him go." I finished for him bitterly. Mac, you're having an emotional affair. Maybe nothing physical has happened, but your heart belongs to him, not me. That's not true, Mac practically shouted, his voice cracking. Louis, I love you. I want to be with you, but you also don't want to lose Philip, I stated, finally accepting the excruciating truth. And I can't share you. I deserve someone who chooses me without doubt, without hesitation, without constantly looking over their shoulder at their ex. Mac's sobs came through the phone clearly, raw and genuine. Please, Louis. One more chance. I'll block Philip completely. I'll do whatever it takes. No, I said firmly, tears finally escaping down my own cheeks. I'm done, Mac. We're done. This relationship is over. I ended the call and immediately powered off my phone. Then I sank onto my floor, back against the bed, and broke down completely. Corey arrived 30 minutes later. I'd given him my spare key months ago for emergencies. He found me still on the floor, held me while I sobbed, and said nothing. Sometimes silence is the greatest comfort. 2 days passed in a blur of work and forced normalcy. Wednesday afternoon, curiosity got the better of me. I checked social media for the first time since the breakup. What I found felt like a punch to the gut. Mac and Philip had gone public with their relationship. A photo showed them together, smiling genuinely, with the caption "Starting fresh," posted just 2 days after our breakup. 2 days. The timeline made everything clear. Mac had been waiting for my permission, waiting for our official ending. The moment he got it, he'd wasted no time jumping into Philip's arms. Part of me had suspected this would happen, but seeing the confirmation still hurt like hell. I deleted Instagram from my phone entirely, then Twitter, then Facebook. I silenced all notifications and threw myself into work with obsessive focus. My boss actually commented on my sudden productivity increase, praising my dedication. If only she knew I was just trying to survive each day without falling apart. Nina checked on me regularly, bringing coffee and occasionally forcing me to eat lunch. You're going to get through this, she said firmly one afternoon, sitting across from me in the cafeteria. I know it doesn't feel like it now, but eventually this will hurt less. When? I asked, genuinely curious. When does it stop feeling like someone ripped my heart out? Gradually, she answered honestly. Not all at once, just little by little, day by day, until one morning you wake up and realize you haven't thought about him in an hour. Then a morning, then a whole day. I wanted to believe her, but the pain felt too enormous, too consuming to ever fade. Corey took a different approach. He showed up Friday night with takeout and a plan. We're going to start rebuilding your life, he announced, spreading food across my coffee table. New hobbies, new routines, new everything. You're not the same person you were when you met Mac, and you shouldn't try to be. What if I don't know who I am without him? I asked quietly, voicing the fear that had been haunting me. Then we figure it out together, Corey said simply. That's what best friends do. We spent that evening brainstorming. Activities I'd always wanted to try, places I'd wanted to visit, goals I'd pushed aside while dating Mac. By the end of the night, I had a list of 15 things, ranging from take a pottery class, to finally learn Spanish, to go on a solo road trip. Start small, Corey advised as he left. Pick one thing and do it this week, just one. Monday morning, I signed up for a pottery class at the community center. It felt simultaneously terrifying and liberating, doing something purely for myself, with no connection to Mac or our shared history. The class started Thursday evening, and I spent the intervening days nervously anticipating it. When Thursday arrived, I almost chickened out, but Corey's words echoed in my head. Start small. So I went. The class was small, just 8 people, and the instructor was patient and encouraging. My first attempt at throwing a pot was disastrous, the clay collapsing under my inexperienced hands. But I laughed, genuinely laughed, for the first time in weeks. Walking home that night, I realized Nina had been right. The pain hadn't disappeared, but for 2 hours I hadn't thought about Mac at all. 2 hours where I'd been fully present, focused on creating something with my own hands, existing entirely in the moment. It wasn't healing. Not yet. But it was a start. And sometimes, that's all you need. Just a small crack in the darkness, letting in the tiniest sliver of light. Enough to remind you that eventually someday you'll be okay again. 4 weeks passed. An entire month since I'd ended things with Mac. 28 days of slowly, painfully rebuilding myself piece by piece. I'd continued with pottery class, started learning Spanish through an app, and even booked that solo road trip for next month. Corey had been right. Establishing new routines helped. Not completely, not perfectly, but enough to make each day slightly more bearable than the last. I'd also started therapy. My first session had been awkward, me stumbling through the story of Mac and Philip while my therapist listened patiently. But by the third session, I'd started unpacking deeper issues. My tendency to ignore red flags, my fear of being alone, my habit of prioritizing others' needs over my own. Therapy wasn't fixing me, but it was helping me understand myself better, which felt like progress. Nina had organized regular friend dinners, forcing me to socialize and remember I had a life beyond romantic relationships. Last week we tried a new Thai restaurant, and I'd actually enjoyed myself, laughing at Marcus's terrible jokes and debating movie rankings with Jessica. For a few hours I'd felt almost normal again. But healing isn't linear. Some days I woke up feeling strong and capable. Other days I could barely get out of bed, weighted down by memories and what-ifs. Today was somewhere in between, manageable but not easy. I decided to work from my favorite coffee shop this afternoon, needing a change of scenery from my apartment. I'd claimed a corner table, laptop open, attempting to focus on a project proposal. The cafe was moderately busy, the ambient noise providing pleasant background static. I'd just finished my second cup of coffee when the door chimed, and I looked up reflexively. Mac walked in. Our eyes met immediately, neither of us expecting this encounter. He froze near the entrance, uncertainty flickering across his face. Then he raised his hand in a hesitant wave, and after a moment's pause, approached my table cautiously. "Louis," he said softly, standing at a respectful distance. "Can I sit down?" Every instinct screamed at me to say no, to protect the fragile progress I'd made. But another part, the part that still needed closure, nodded silently. Mac pulled out the chair across from me and sat, his movements careful and deliberate. "I came here hoping to find you," he admitted, not quite meeting my eyes. "I wanted to apologize for everything that happened." "Okay," I said neutrally, keeping my emotional walls firmly in place. "What I did to you was inexcusable," Mac continued, his voice heavy with regret. "You deserved complete honesty, complete commitment, and I couldn't give you that. I was wrong. Completely, inexcusably wrong." "Yes," I agreed simply. "You were." Mac flinched at my bluntness but pushed forward. "Philip and I, it didn't work. We tried making it work, convinced ourselves we could recapture what we'd had before. But it fell apart within 3 weeks. We're toxic together, always have been." I realized too late that I'd destroyed something real, us chasing a fantasy that was never going to work. I took a slow sip of my coffee, processing his words carefully. "I'm glad you figured that out. But Mac, this isn't closure for me. This is your realization, your regret. And honestly, I don't need it anymore." Pain flashed visibly across his features. Have you moved on already?" "I'm working on it," I corrected gently but firmly. "And that process doesn't include you. You're my past, Mac. I'm building my future now and you're not part of it." He nodded slowly, accepting the finality in my words. "I understand. I deserve this." "It's not about what you deserve," I said, surprised by my own calmness. "It's about what I need, and I need to move forward without carrying this weight anymore." Mac stood up, preparing to leave, but he paused, one hand resting on the back of his chair. "I really did love you, Louie. I was just too emotionally damaged to show it properly." "I know," I replied quietly, "and I meant it. But love without action is just words. And words aren't enough to build a relationship on." He left then, disappearing through the cafe door and out of my life for good. I sat alone at my table, coffee growing cold, expecting to feel something. Sadness, anger, regret. Instead, I felt surprisingly light. The conversation I'd been dreading for weeks had happened and I'd survived it. More than survived, I'd held my ground, maintained my boundaries and refused to be pulled back into his orbit. My phone buzzed with a text from Nina. Still on for dinner Friday? Bringing my friend Alex, thought you two might hit it off. I smiled a genuine smile and typed back, absolutely. Looking forward to it. Was I ready to date again? Probably not. But I was ready to be open to possibilities, to let new people into my life without constantly comparing them to Mac. That felt like significant progress. Packing up my laptop, I noticed a missed notification from my Spanish app. I'd maintained a 30-day streak, 30 consecutive days of showing up for myself, doing something purely because I wanted to, not because anyone else expected it. That meant something. Walking home, I took a detour through the park, enjoying the late afternoon sunshine. Couples walked hand in hand. Families played with children. Joggers maintained their steady pace. Life continued everywhere around me, indifferent to my personal drama. Somehow that felt comforting rather than isolating. My phone rang, Corey's name flashing on the screen. Hey, you okay? Nina mentioned Mac showed up at the cafe. I'm fine, I said and realized I actually meant it. We talked. He apologized. It's done. How do you feel? Corey asked carefully. Free, I answered honestly. I feel free. Corey laughed, relief evident in his voice. Good. That's really good, Louis. Proud of you, man. That evening, I stood in my apartment, the same space that had witnessed so many breakdowns over the past month, and felt different somehow. The pain hadn't vanished completely. Some mornings would still be hard. Some nights I'd probably still cry. But I'd survived the worst of it. I'd walked through the fire and emerged on the other side, scarred but stronger. Mac wasn't with me anymore. Philip had him, or maybe they'd already fallen apart again. Honestly, it didn't matter. Their story was no longer mine to care about. I had my own story to write now, my own future to build, my own happiness to pursue. And for the first time in a very long time, that felt like enough. I felt like enough. Not broken, not incomplete, just me, learning to be whole on my own. Alone but no longer lonely. Hurt but healing, and finally genuinely, completely free.